Muy buena gente, este es un vídeo básicamente en el que hablo con MORTDOG del último parche, ¿vale? Y hacemos unas conclusiones finales sobre el parche. El subtítulo del vídeo es básicamente una inteligencia artificial intentando traducirlo al español, ¿vale? Va a quedar un poco raro, espero que por lo menos esté gracioso. Si no tenéis un mínimo idea de inglés, probablemente no lo entendáis. Pero bueno, en general lo que quería comentaros es que esta colaboración con MORTDOG me hizo muchísima ilusión. Pensad que él es game dev del TFT, no tiene por qué hacer este tipo de cooperaciones. Él se toma su tiempo y saca de su horario ajetreado de trabajo la posibilidad de cooperar con nosotros de esta manera. A mí personalmente, como ya me encantaba analizar estos parches, porque ya sabéis que lo hago bastante a menudo, pues el hecho de poder colaborar con él y hablar sobre el parche me hizo muchísima ilusión. Le pude hacer un montón de preguntas clave. Lógicamente, no voy a usar un vídeo como este para meterle mierda por todos lados sin ningún tipo de ton ni son. Fueron preguntas razonables, justificadas y siempre desde el respeto. Aún así, él me dijo que era una reunión entre nosotros dos y que no tenía nada que ver con Riot y que le podía preguntar lo que quisiese en el tono que quisiera, que era una charla simplemente entre dos personas. Así que por mi parte, genial la experiencia, me gustó muchísimo. Espero poder volver a colaborar con él en el futuro y la verdad que ha sido una experiencia maravillosa. Espero que a vosotros también os guste y ahí van los 50 minutitos de chapa.
Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, back for the patch 13.4 postmortem, where we talk about what worked, what didn't, and how the meta's doing. And today I'm joined by SnoodyBoo. How are you doing today?
Hey man, pleasure to be here. I'm always commenting on these patch notes anyway, so it's finally awesome to actually get a chance to talk to you about this.
Yeah, should be fun. This was a pretty big patch in the sense that it didn't really touch a lot of champions and traits much, but a lot of like augment balance, some big item changes as well to hopefully get things more in the meta. So it was kind of a bigger patch than normal. We were also coming off 13.3, which was that very heavy AD meta. Now, admittedly, I haven't played a ton of live games because I've been focused on getting the mid set out. So I'm going to ask you, how are you feeling about this meta?
Okay, so it's been a big shift, right? They went from a full AD to full AP, and especially focus on these admin units. They're totally bonkers. I mean, they're pretty much dominating the meta. I don't know stats-wise how you guys are seeing it, but it's a total twist the other way around. So it's actually kind of weird because people have to relearn the game, even though it's kind of like the end of the set, right? Yeah.
I could see. Yeah, from what I had seen, it was like AD was still the highest peak, but a lot of times the way you got there was through underground, the underground 2-1 opener being really, really strong. Also, AP, it seemed like was starting to fall off a little bit because people had figured out Aegis counters. But to your point, admin seems really good if you get the right combinations. There are some pretty nutty variations out there, and the admin 4 buff really helped it kind of ease into that curve, and if you can pull off admin 6, that seems quite good. So
Yeah, for sure. Actually, it's kind of funny because AD peak comps don't win as much anymore. I mean, you just mentioned that it's the highest peak, but those boards don't always instant win like the last patch, like the Felius 2, Samaria 2, and Strong Frontline. They sometimes lose to, I don't know, any random comp.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, which is healthy, right? We don't want them to always win, so
Sure, yeah, great.
yeah. Cool. All right, well, let's jump into it and go over each change and kind of see how we got here. I'm
Sure.
scrolling through. Yep, Ari came out. Ari, turns out people really like Ari, and she is a very successful champion, so seeing a lot of chibi Aris running around. All right, system changes. This is one that hasn't been talked about a lot behind the scenes. The player damage being reduced by 1 if you lose by 5 or more units. So,
Yeah.
from what I can tell, the biggest thing this actually helped was underground. It allowed for more room of error in that underground start if you preserve just a little bit more health. But overall, I still think this will be long-term better for the game once underground's balanced. So I'm calling this a success. But like I said, I think maybe underground heist 1, 2, 3 probably should have been hit too.
Yeah, for sure. Them to be different patches is not optimal, but I mean, overall, since you increased the damage it was on stage 3, right? I always felt that the pace of the game was way too fast, and you just couldn't create anymore. So I really appreciate this because starting at 30 HP is just not fun.
Yeah, I can see that. Cool. Component anvils, +1 choice. I think this is just, obviously players enjoy it when we give them more choices and more ways to get what they want. So I think this was an easy win. But I also think, it's still 50% chance to get the component you want. And I think that's healthier than, the 37 it was before. So I'm happy with this change.
Overall, what made you go away from the direction that it was a big loot on the Dragonlands towards this only one pick of one component? I mean, I know that was a theme from the last set, but you kind of could have integrated it somehow, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Treasure Dragon was definitely a mechanic for, Dragonlands. We wanted to keep it to that. But we still, we know there's this pain point, right, where like you're playing an AP comp and then you get dropped 2 swords. So we're really trying to avoid that. I think in the future what you'll see is we'll actually lean into this anvil mechanic a little bit more. Because again, getting late items really struggles with that, and so I think it's been a nice in between, right, where it's not so invasive, where it's like this big thing, but having a little agency in those late game item choices helps a lot.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely more balanced. I'd say more. Yeah.
You don't want to get, as you're going to see in like 13.5, we're really trying to avoid games being decided by just literal pure RNG. So yeah. All right, early game gold distribution. And again, this is another easy win. Not having the orbs drop off the last is good, and we're improving this again in 13.5. So this is just another easy quality of life change.
For sure. Yeah, I hate to make the fast choices in 2 seconds. So that's awesome.
All right. Cool. Now we're in the trait section. So I'm not going to go read all of these, but the TLDR here is this was a lot of admin changes. The general idea here being admin 4 getting a pretty big buff, a 30% buff, which is big, and then a lot of rebalancing so that the ones that were already good weren't insanely good, like the gold drops and things like that. Overall,
death, I guess.
Yeah. Overall, it seems like admin is now in a very, very good spot. There are still ones that are good and ones that are bad. The nice thing here is 4 admin is still the best. Like it's actually playable now. You don't have to hit 6. So I think that's a success. The thing I'll note is that admin 6 definitely has the highest cap. Like you said, there are certain combinations that are insane. I'll be honest with you, this trait is like a pain to balance because there are so many different combinations.
Of course, yeah.
But I still think the admin 4 change was a success because, again, admin 4 before this looked like garbage in the data, and now it actually looks okay. But I think there was more work to do in the admin 6 and the peaks. Like, there are still certain combos in here that need adjustment.
Yeah, for sure. I actually wanted to ask related to this then. How do you decide what possible combinations there are like on admins? Because sometimes I just feel like the 3 admins are totally impeccable in the sense there's like 3 that proc at 66%, one's attack speed, one's, I don't know, healing or something, and none of them really do anything for you. Is there like a way these go together, or is this just like totally random?
No, so the way it works right now is, the set designers have made a bunch of combinations that they think can work, and then it just pulls 3 of them. Okay. So there is no, it doesn't look at your board. It doesn't see how many items you have or anything like that. And then to your point, like there are certain combinations that are really hard to use, but also high potential. You mentioned the drop below 66% health one. I've seen some versions of that where you get like an admin Z, and then he has like 500 AD, and it gets really, really nutty. But it's so hard, right? Like I had one of those games, and it's like, okay, will I ever have another one of those games? Because probably the odds that I find an admin spat and it's that combination is like so insane. And that's the crazy thing about admin. It's like you get these like 1 in 500 experiences that are so hard. So.
Did you ever consider to like tune down all the admins and put a reroll on one of these admin choices, like kind of a hero augment?
Yeah, so it's a common thing to like get more choices. Spoiler, I'm gonna spoil something in the future. We are gonna add a 4th choice for the mid set. So at least try to lean into that a little bit more, because I do think it was too much. Rerolling, it was already a complicated mechanic where it was like read all these 4 choices, think through them, and then add a reroll on top of that felt like a little much. But I do agree that like 3, sometimes it's just, yep, these are all terrible, no thank you. So yeah, definitely work to do there. Again, with this really, really complicated trait, turns out it's a lot of work to get right. So.
Yeah, it's also the fun part of the set, right? These traits. I always love those.
Yep, exactly. Cool. Gadgetine. We got rid of RFC and replaced it with Titan's Resolve. I think that was a success. I think Titan's Resolve is way more fun. I think you don't deal with the RFC Lulus. Is the Gadgetine Titan's Resolve a little too strong? Maybe, but I think it's more Gadgetine, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think the item replacement was good. So.
No, I mean, RFC was definitely the most useless item for Gadgeting, so that's fine. I just think overall that the double buff was a little bit too much. Like, I mean, Gadgeting 5 is just way overtuned, in my opinion, at the moment.
Yeah,
well, 36% reduction in damage, right?
Yeah. I was going to talk about that when we get to the emblems, but...
Oh, sure, we can do that. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, but I mean, TLDR, you're not wrong, so... Cool. Let's keep going. Hacker. So this one was kind of a miss in the sense that like it was good that we made this change, but it wasn't quite implemented correctly. And I think it's on away boards right now or ghost boards. One of the two is still pretty buggy on live. I know we're fixing it next patch, but again, we should have got it right the first time and got it out there. And so Hacker continues to be this like really fun concept that has just so many issues around the implementation.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Hacker has been just a pain in the ass to play this set overall, especially on LeBlanc, because she just kind of shoots it wherever she wants. I mean,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I do think the change where now they always target the lowest health enemy, or the closest enemy, at least made it more predictable, and you could actually counterplay it. So that was a good change. So,
Yep.
cool.
But their pathing after that is kind of weird, yeah.
Yeah. Mecha 5 buff. I think this was a success. I think now Mecha 5 is actually worth playing, you know, if you can get to it. So overall, I think Mech is still in a weird spot where it has like this really gross curve where like you should never be playing Mech in stage 2, but in stage 5 it actually has like insane power. But I think for what it is, I think the Mech 5 buff was still correct.
No, you can definitely play it now because it wasn't that important back when. I wanted to ask, by the way, did you ever intend that like the mecha units converted into mech were kind of shined throughout the set? Because I haven't seen that concept that much. I mean, I've seen Super Dread and I've seen Super Set, but I haven't seen like many Morty mechs or Fiddle mechs or Nunu. I've never seen those guys pop off. Was that something you were planning for, or it just never happened?
I mean, we're hoping for it. I think the challenge has been figuring out that right balance, right? Where it's like, because again, the mech trait requires you to sacrifice 2 units, which is a lot.
Of course.
And then the stats it gives you requires that unit to want to take damage and want AD and AP, right? So, for example, like Mech Fiddle, he doesn't care about that 60% AD. So you end up with like this very narrow field of champions that's actually really good with it. Like Mech Vi is really, really good. But because of those stats, it's like very narrow, and I think that has been kind of the miss. I think trying to make Mech work with like AD and AP has led to that sort of really narrow choices. My YouTube video today is actually Mech Riven, which wasn't bad, but I don't know if it would hold up in like a challenger lobby. And again, it's pretty, rare, but there's a few options out there. And again, it's just so hard to pilot because you have to like want the Mech emblem early, but not play it until stage 4 or 5 when you have enough units that being down 2 units isn't a big deal.
Yeah, you need to kind of go underground into it and just get some econ advantage. Yeah, I get what you're saying, yeah.
Yep. All right, Sure Shot. This was a big nerf. This was a big swing. It was a 20% nerf, 25% at 2. And it's debatable if it was a little too much, but the fact that Sure Shots can still succeed makes me think it was okay. I'm also glad we didn't, double nerf and like nerf Aphelios and this. But it's nice to actually see AP comps be playable, so I'm calling this a success, but I think it's debatable.
Do you think if it would have gone like a middle point, like maybe 7 or an 18%, it would have still been fine for AD to survive this patch? Because I think they're like a little bit undertuned now.
Yeah, I think that's the tough part. And my gut, and I'm curious your gut, but my gut is at 7, we still would have had a very AD heavy meta. That's my gut, but that's one of those hard things that's really hard to tell, right? I think we've shown over the years that TFT balance is razor thin, right? Like the slightest adjustment can shift the meta really hard, but Sure Shot was very dominant last patch, and the fact that they're still succeeding in some cases makes me think this was correct. Data-wise, they look quite fine. The top 4 costs in our data are still Belveth, Samira, and Zed. So
really?
Yeah. So, but again, part of the thing with our data that you have to be careful with is like it's often catching up, right? Players are still playing the way they were playing the last patch, and so that's why you have to kind of look to like the really, really high elo to see that shift. It might, like, for example, even despite the Gunblade nerf, which we'll talk about later, Gunblade is still the most built item in the game right now, and that's a lot of people playing the way they were playing the patch before,
Okay, so by the way, on that topic of the stats, where do you take these? Is this like an overall stat? Is it mostly like based on the global player base, or is it just like on a challenger, or is it like a grandmaster, or is it just like we've got 1 billion players and these are the overall stats?
Yeah, so the way we look at stats is we actually look at the top 1% of players across the globe. That's
really?
What we look at. We only look at top 1%. A really good example of this, actually, if you want to dig in, you can use this like on tactics.tools, is if you try to go to like all elos, Anima Squad looks broken. If you try to go to all elos, like Anima Squad 5 at 2-1 has like an average finish of like 3.1 because Anima Squad is a low elo buster comp. But if we balanced around that, then Anima Squad would be unplayable at high elo. And so our theory has always been that because TFT is a knowledge-based game, you balance around the high elos and everyone else has to kind of like catch up. The counterexample is actually Underground, which at high elos at 2-1 is obviously good, right? Like we talked about. You switch to all elos, it's mid to bad because most people don't know how to pilot Underground. And so like we can acknowledge like that low elo difference, but we do not balance around it.
Okay, but that's actually interesting because it's mostly master players and above, I guess, then, right?
Yep.
Because 1%?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and you have to go that low because you need the sample size, right? You can't just balance around 1600 LP plus because then you have like 10 players, so.
Yeah, we do the same when we check stats. I mean, for our own gameplays, I guess. Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's keep going. Lulu buff. I think this is a debatable one. I think this buff is correct without the Gadgetine buff. I think Gadgetine is the thing that's holding this up a little too much. Probably shouldn't have shipped this without the Gadgetine nerf that's coming next patch. But I think in order to get Lulu to be like a good item carrier in 2-1 without Gadgetine, I think this buff was necessary. But like I said, I think the miss here was not nerfing Gadgetine 5.
I have a question for you related to Lulu and Talia, specifically on this, because they're two units that I don't think they really need damage buffs, more like their IQ or hardly walk up or interactions overall, because Lulu has 4 range, but she needs to walk up, right, and then cast. And I have the same feeling that with Talia, that she has very good damage, but she's always missing ults. Did you ever consider like changing her, the way she ults, like what you did with Morgana a few sets back? Instead of like buffing her damage.
I think that's possible. The challenge with those is that they take a lot more time in implementation. And so, yeah, that's the tricky part. So it's like if we can get them to work as is, we should try that first. If that becomes necessary, I think that's a way to go. Lulu, I think, is one we should probably hit because, like you said, the awkward like 4 range, 3 range thing is really bad and really uncomfortable. Talia, I'm less confident in because Talia does always aim for like the most enemies she can hit. I think where it gets weird is the tiebreaker. I think there'd be some good logic of like, because right, a lot of the times when you see her miss, it's because she could hit this target with one, or like she could shoot 3 ways, they all hit one target, and I think right now it's random when there's a tie. But if like the tiebreaker instead became something like furthest or most damage done or items, yeah, like that could help. That would be the direction I would go as the designer. But again, finding the time to do that implementation work is a lot harder than, say, adjusting a number. And so sometimes we're just kind of playing catch up there.
Of course, yeah, because we're basing on new sets and stuff. Yeah, I get that.
Yep. All right. Galio. This change seems fine. I mean, it's not like anyone's playing Mascot or Galio early. Honestly, this is the kind of change that if you deleted this from the patch notes, nobody would notice. I don't think it moved the needle enough.
No, I mean, maybe on the Super Galio, on the Galio carry one, but except for that, nothing else.
Yeah.
Because ever since he wasn't like the most broken unit and you played him like since stage 2.
Yeah.
Ever since he's been a normal thing.
Yeah, ever since 1223 where he was busted, yeah. Cool. Gangplank. So, God, this is a change that I wish we'd done ages ago. A 1 cost did not need to also cleanse cloud control. That's just silly. It also made his tooltip nice and simpler. I'm glad we did this. Gangplank's still a good unit when you get that carry augment, so this change was a win.
For sure.
All right, controversial one here. Lee Sin bug fix. Obviously, fixing the bug was good. That's not the controversial part. I think the controversial part is, was this enough to address Cleansing Safeguard? And Cleansing Safeguard is something we still wanted to be good, but is it too good right now? That's the $1 million question. And I think the challenge with Cleansing Safeguard is that when it's good, right, when you have 2 Lee Sins, both 2-star, both with 3 items, and maybe you even get first aid kit, it's bonkers. It's really good and very frustrating to play against. But it's still generally overall balanced, and that's the tricky thing. So it's one of those, like, is it okay? Right now, what I'm leaning towards is that it feels weird that upgrading Lee Sin is kind of a downgrade, and I think that's not okay. So right now I'm leaning towards the way we need to address this in the future is the strongest Lee Sin thing, so that only one of them gets the benefit. Feels a little lame, but that's kind of where I'm at with Lee Sin.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the biggest thing for me is that usually I base my opinions also on what my viewers say, right? Because they're mostly casual players, and
Yep.
it's really hard for them to understand that two-star unit is better than a three-star unit.
Yep.
But overall, I think after this bug fix, he's a pretty decent unit because he's still bursting through, right? It's very specific, as you said, so I wouldn't be bothered by that. But I do want to ask about these, like, what made it that this said there's like so many bugs around specific interactions? Because there's been like the I don't know. Some patch has been like the hacker bug and
Yep.
lesion buff, and I felt it's been many more than usual. Is it because like when coding these units, it's been much harder, or what? What was it exactly?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we've, as you're aware of for some upcoming information we can't talk about yet, the team has been growing. We've got some newer people on the team, and we're still trying to, ship things on time. And so for a lot of our newer people, there's some growing pains, right? Learning these implementation practices and things like that. We're also building up the QA team behind the scenes to make sure we catch, but it's growing pains, right? It really is growing pains, and mistakes are happening, and we're trying to power through it. It doesn't make it acceptable, but it's just, you're asked the truth. The truth is it's growing pains. We've got some people that are newer, they're ramping up, and they're getting better at it. They're catching things quicker, but it's going to take some time, so...
So you would say like due to this is like a testing set in that sense, and then like for set 9 or set 10 things will be smoother in that aspect.
I mean, that's the hope. I don't want to promise it, and then I can't promise the future.
Yeah.
If 3 people quit and we have to retrain 3 more, that could happen. But that's the idea, right? And so for a lot of the designers on this set, it is their first set, and so there's mistakes that are getting through. And again, that doesn't make it acceptable, but and it is a complex game with a lot of interactions. There's a lot of, this Lee Sin bug has been in since the launch of the set, right? Only Cleansing Safeguard finally exposed that it was a thing. I'm aware of other versions. For example, the big one going around right now is the double Nunu. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Oh, is that still working? The target lock, it's still working.
Yeah, it's the same kind of issue where it's like the two are resetting each other's ICD. Yeah, it's a complex game with a lot of interactions, and so getting them all tested is challenging. Again, doesn't make it acceptable, but you asked for the answer. That's the honest answer.
Yeah, that's just what I wanted to hear. Yeah.
Malphite. So this was a big buff to Malphite. I think this was good for Malphite. I think the one thing you could argue is that this should have come with a Neela nerf, because the Supers Neela comp got a lot stronger because of this. And I think that was kind of a mistake. But I think Malphite is now actually a champion that isn't terrible. So it's still a success, but it should have come with a Neela nerf.
I definitely agree, because when you play these super units, I mean, Lee Sin or Malphite are usually not that important themselves, right? It's mostly about your carry unit. So the fact that you actually have a strong tank, or him being carry thanks to his augment, very nice. But the leader unit combi is just a pain in the ass at the moment.
Yep. Fiora. Fiora is going to go down as my least favorite unit in this set. She exists. We keep buffing her, and she still exists, and she's still not fun.
I've lost so much elo to this unit. I can't even recall.
Yeah, every time I try to play around her, it's a failure. She's a great trait bot if you're playing Oxforce and Duelist, but you never want to invest in her. She's still not there. This helped a little. She's still not there. She's still a ways off. So.
You think even if this was a 30%, she'd still be off? Or
yeah, I actually think she's way off, right? Because even at 30%, that's equivalent of the Rel carry augment, which is good. But the reason the Rel carry augment is successful is because she also does a ton of damage. Fiora doesn't do a ton of damage. Fiora just kind of tickles and heals and stalls and doesn't do a lot. So I think Fiora would need a lot more work to be a champion you really want to invest in.
Okay, makes sense.
Cool. Speaking of bugs, the Jax bugs. This is another one that honestly, this actually has a little bit wider global implications. Right now, Jax is actually dominating on Fight for the Golden Spatula, our mobile China version. And this came in a little hot, and he's not doing that great in the rest of the world on PC. And so trying to figure out what that difference is, there's clearly some difference in implementation. But right now, I would say this change was good because it made Mech Jax better. And I know there's that Hacker Jax version that's going around that's okay. But I actually think Jax is still a little underpowered, just a little on PC.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you can make up for it with a Soraka stacking that hard, or I don't know, AP admins or something, it definitely works. But he feels much worse overall. Yeah.
Yep. The Kai'Sa nerf, I think this was fine. It made the tooltip simpler, and Kai'Sa 3 is not quite as big a boost as it was before. I think Recon is still a very good comp. So, I don't know. I think this change was a success.
Recon, I mean, Recon must be really weird for you guys to design because I've tried so many Recon champs and most of them just like troll around.
Yep.
Have you seen that Wukong clip? Or
Oh yeah. The Wukong one's really funny. He just never casts.
Or Vi just like punching the wall or something. I mean,
yeah. The funny one I did the other day was Recon carry echo, the carry augment. So he would roll away and then roll right back in and then get a giant crit, which was pretty funny.
At least he cast it. That was nice.
He did cast, yes, exactly. LeBlanc. I think this change was actually... So, again, you could debate this because, again, admin doing very good. But I think in terms of LeBlanc being a carry and being healthy, I still think this change was correct. It was a very slight buff. And I think, you want LeBlanc 2 to be something you're excited about in the mid-game. I think this did that. I think this was correct.
My only issue with this is that I don't know if it's on the admin side or the LeBlanc side, but LeBlanc 2 kind of gets you to 9 way too consistently. I don't know if it's if you high roll the admin or whatever, but if you get a carry augment plus a LeBlanc 2, you can just like fast 9 easily.
Gotcha. So in your mind, this actually might have been unnecessary.
Either this or the admin. I'm not really sure which part, but
yeah, that's true.
One of both.
That's true. The combination of the both. Yeah, that's true. Because now you're probably running like a 4 admin LeBlanc early, and that can do a lot of work. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, maybe this shouldn't have come with the admin change and just stuck to the admin change. I can see that.
Yep.
Cool. Aurelion Sol. This was a good change. He's still the weakest 4 cost, but he's still good.
Weakest.
Yeah, he is the weakest, but he's good, right? Like, I mean, he's not bad by any means. You still, if you have a blue buff Asol, you still play it for the anti-heal, the free damage. He's a great secondary carry. So I think this change was successful, and I think, honestly, Asol could even have a little more. Just a little. Again, he's the worst, but that doesn't mean he's bad.
Oh, yeah, for sure. By the way, are you guys happy overall with the threat concept? There's like units that don't require any preparation or anything?
Yeah, I think as a concept, it's generally good. I don't know that we would keep it in every set, but I think overall this set, it has been very positive. It has allowed easier transitions. So I think we'll definitely learn from threats.
Great.
Bel'Veth. I think this is a very slight nerf. According to the data, if you believe it, Bel'Veth is still number 1. I think Bel'Veth is fine. I think this nerf was a success. You still play around him if you hit him early. He probably can't carry you to the end, which is exactly what a threat's supposed to be. You need traits, turns out. But Bel'Veth can still win games, so I don't know. I call this a success.
No, yeah, for sure. Is it also, it got her better with her pathing, right? Not only when she got
Yeah,
stuck,
that's what it says. I'm always suspicious because, like, I don't know. The pathing is such a tricky thing, and, like, there are cases where, like, it feels like it's better, and there are cases where it's like, what are you doing? Why are you in the enemy's backline? Get the hell out of there. So, I don't know. I think there's still room to make it better, but it probably got a little better.
Yeah, a little bit better for sure. She's less suicidal.
Yep. Okay, Soraka and Talia buffs. I think these were correct. I think we were, trying to make sure AP was more playable. I think to your point, maybe there's a world where Soraka plus admin wasn't correct. So maybe you take out the Soraka one. But I think the Talia one was a slam dunk. Talia's still just like good. She's not broken or anything. So I'm going to call both of these a success, but I could see your argument of like maybe Soraka was unnecessary.
Oh yeah, Soraka is definitely the same concept as LeBlanc, and also we have like a very so I think Ganmei. He's a very AP heavy player.
Oh yeah, he loves
just spams his comp.
Yeah,
he loves his Soraka, his gameplay. So he showed us all in Spain how to play his comp, and then ever since you buffed it, it's been pretty much free EO for us.
Yeah, it's been interesting because Ganmei is often in lobby 2, and he'll debate with the NA players. Ganmei is a firm believer of the Heart, the Soraka, the Admin, the Zoe. And NA is not so much, and so they often butt heads a little bit about that comp. So it'll be interesting to see. I wish we had more regional competition because it'd be interesting to see right now if that was actually true. Like what would happen? Because that's the other thing.
Like a mini world championship.
Yeah, because the regions are often very insular, and so like they almost develop their own metas. So it's pretty interesting. Because speaking of which, our next change, Zed, I know China right now is playing a lot of duelists, a lot more than both NA and EU. And so this Zed change seems like it was successful in rest of world, but actually might have been a little much in China. Zed's doing very well in China.
You mean like a vertical duelist kind of thing,
Yep.
or
Yep.
okay?
Yeah, they play the 6 duelist with some hacker, and they use that Zed and get in that backline, and we're seeing a lot of hacker success. And this Zed buff did a lot of work. So,
By the way, did Laser Carp die off this patch data wise? Because it kind of feels like it. I mean, I've seen Zed, but just kind of like a vertical duelist.
yeah,
I've not seen 7 or 9 Laser Carp anymore.
yeah. So Laser Core and Duelist both have what I call a toxic curve, which is that if you have like 5 Laser Core in stage 3 or 7 Laser Core in stage 4, they do amazing, right? But because they're flat damage, they start to fall off very quickly. And so if you look in our data, what happens is if you have them early, they're super duper high, and then they slowly fall off, and by the end, they're actually the worst. If you're still running 7 Laser Core on stage 6, you're like the worst trait in the game. But again, if you have 7 Laser Core at 4.2, your average finish is like 3.3. And so
because you can just spike off it.
Right, exactly. It's a very tempo-heavy comp. That and Duelist both share that same property. And so it's not an easy challenge to like fix that. But that's just something you have to be aware of when playing the comp is like you play it when you hit it very early, right? When you play with some augments or you hit that early Zed. Otherwise, stay the hell away from it.
Also, another question related to this kind of came up because I guess you're not only responsible yourself for all of these changes. Have you ever felt like in one of these patches that one change was so far off that even yourself were enjoying that much of the patch, or like?
No, the good news is generally with these changes, I do sign off on all these. So if there was a change that was coming in that was really bad, I would probably shoot it down. Also, my job as sort of like the gameplay director is even if that were true, I would never tell you because it's my job to make sure the patch is good, not throw someone under the bus being like, why did they make that shitty change? And so you should blame me for everything. That's kind of my job.
Yeah, the MORTDOG concept, I get it. Yeah.
Yep. Aphelios. Aphelios, I think, is healthy now. It's interesting to see people actually play other guns. I see red gun getting chosen sometimes. It's nice. I still see blue gun getting chosen sometimes. Seems like purple gun isn't getting chosen that much, but overall, I think Aphelios is finally like right where he's supposed to be. So.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you only chose one gun related to his buff was kind of weird. Now that you have to think about it, it's more interesting.
Yep. And then Urgot nerfs. I got to be honest, I was a little concerned these were too much. They weren't. Urgot's still a god. Honestly, he probably needs more. Urgot is just, I don't know. He'll go down as like one of the most over-designed champions in TFT. He just does too much.
The moment I saw him at the release of the set, he reminded me to this the Time Kench mercenary unit.
Yep.
But with less he needed even less because you have to feed him, right? Because he just does it all on his own.
Yep. So, still work to do there. All right, items. Bloodthirster. I think this was a good change. Bloodthirster's a little bit better now. Still not as popular as Gunblade, but like at least it's a decent item.
Oh, not as popular. Okay, yeah, because you don't play as much AD this patch, I guess.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. It's less flexible, right? Like Gunblade can go on AD and AP. Bloodthirster, you don't really put on your AP, and so it's just a lot less flexible right now. Yeah. This Chalice change, I think, was a big success. I think Chalice is like actually okay to build, and it didn't buff the 6-item carry, like your triple Chalice Viegos or anything. So I'm pretty happy with this Chalice change.
I actually wanted to ask related to Chalice and Zeeks because I've had a feeling that ever since Better Together rotated out, they haven't been usable at all. I mean, in high elo, nobody does these unless you get them like as your last choice. So I still feel them kind of to be underwhelming. I don't know.
Yeah, so what you're describing is a longer-term problem we need to solve, which is that, like you said, these are not items that you ever slam, right? You're not early slamming Chalice or anything like that because what you need is tank items and carry items. But if you get these items off a carousel in stage 5 or 6, these are probably best in slot, right? Like, these are amazing items. But that's not really a healthy curve for our items that you build. And so that is a problem. I can't talk about solutions yet, but there's definitely a problem on our mind, is that it's just weird to have items that you don't want to build at certain points in the game. So agree with the problem statement.
Especially because you guys have been focusing so hard on this, like every item is useful for every champ, right? So because Gambling and Bloodthirster work for everything, it just felt kind of weird.
Yeah, you're not wrong. We're aware of it, but like I said, it's something I can't talk about the solves right now.
Sure, go. No problem.
Cool. Deathblade, I think this buff was fine, but honestly, you're not really excited to build Deathblade still. It's probably still a little underpowered. I think the big proponent here is that the best AD champions in the set right now already get a bunch of AD from Sure Shot and things like that. So it's like you're never building this on, say, or even like Draven, he gets a bunch of AD from Mech. So why would you build Deathblade? So none of our AD champs right now don't get AD from other sources. So it's just a bad set for Deathblade right now.
Yeah, you also need always this healing item, Last Whisper, so it just doesn't fit in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gargoyle Stoneplate, I think this was a good buff. It's still not quite as good as, Bramble Dragonclaw, but I think it at least made the item a little bit more slammable and not quite as bad.
Maybe buff a little bit on the base stats you get, so the extra stats you get, right? Like one on that or something, a plus one.
Yeah, if we have to.
It definitely feels usable. Yeah.
Yep, but again, direction-wise was a good buff.
For sure.
Hand of Justice. I think this was a really key good buff. This item's actually playable now and buildable now. And when it rolls the 30% Omnivamp, it's actually really good. So I'm really happy with this change.
Definitely agree.
Yeah. Gunblade, man, I got to tell you, it was really painful to not do 20% or 25%. It's just such a weird-looking number at 22. But I think 22 is actually exactly where it should be. The item is good. It's not broken now. I think this was a success.
Yep, I definitely like where it's at now.
Cool. Morello, I think this item is fine. The AP was fine here. I think the challenge is just there aren't really any great users, and most of the champions that you wanted on, like, say, Talia, you still want the, like, Jeweled Gauntlet and Guardbreaker. You just don't have the room for the Morello. It's really only good on, like, Sejuani or Urgot or Fiddle, which is all late game anyway, so it kind of has that same problem we were just talking about with Chalice. So I don't think any numbers are necessarily going to fix this. And then if we buffed it too much more, it would just become a must build. So, I don't know. I think it's as healthy as it can be in this set.
I think even if you buffed it more, I don't think people would use it because it's a fast-paced kind of meta all the time. So it just doesn't proc fast enough.
Yep. Protector's Vow. I think this was a good change. This item's fun to use now, and the starting mana is really fun. So it feels like a tank item that's pretty cool to use. So I don't know. As far as if Protector's Vow is ever going to be good, I think this is a good state for it to be in.
Yep, for sure.
Cool. Quicksilver, I think this buff was okay, but it didn't change anything. You still don't ever want to build it, so I don't think it did enough.
Yeah, not at all, yeah.
Cool. Sunfire, I think this was a good nerf. I think it's still a very good item. Not worried about this.
How do you feel about specifically Sunfire and like the Ornn items? Because those are the items that have been nerfed like more over the time TFT has existed, right? Mm-hmm. So it kind of feels weird to me that they keep nerfing it and people still build it all the time. Is it because these items are just like way overtuned and we still need to adjust them? Or is it just like a patch kind of thing or a set kind of thing? Or
I think with Sunfire in particular, it's a combination of it's very good early, so it's tempo and usually helps your average finish, so it looks really good. Because Sunfire falls off by like stage 4 and stage 5, but getting that easy stage 2 and 3 feels good. You need anti-heal, and so players have high satisfaction with it. And so it's just this like high satisfaction plus tempo item. It's interesting because Zerat is actually better tempo, but lower satisfaction. And, just Zerat.
Really?
Yeah, Zerat early is very, very good. I think China has shown this a couple times, right? Like you build triple Zerat and you almost don't need a front line. But I think it's just, again, the satisfaction of like getting that anti-heal, getting that burn, and how much it does in the early game just feels so good. And so unless we change its core identity, which is that slow burn when fights are slow, that's always going to be true, right? And so, yeah. And then the Ornn items is a little trickier because the Ornn items are just like fun. Players really like the fun Ornn items, and when they're good and fun, turns out that's a bad... yeah. 2-1 collector, very fun. Early blitz grab, very fun for you, not for your opponent. So.
Oh yeah, regarding that, by the way, how is it that in Underground Cash Out you can get the two times the same Ornn item? Because that's just horrible.
Yeah, it is. For now, we went with the... I don't know if you remember the release trailer, but we talked about how sometimes it's not the heist you want. Sometimes we wanted you to see heists that you weren't happy with, to try to like tempt you of like, no, you got to keep digging or tough it out, and that was kind of the theme of Underground. But I've someone sent me a screenshot the other day where there are 4 items. It was a heist 3 cash out with 4 items, and it was Morello, Sunfire, and they already had built a Sunfire.
Oh, that's horrible. Yeah.
It's like, I'm so sorry, bro. I'm so sorry.
Just died for free.
Yeah.
What a hero.
So, Zeke, same thing as Chalice. Again, it was a good buff, but it still has the same problem as Chalice, like we talked about. So, okay. Hero augments. I'm not going to read through all of these. There's just too much. So stop me if I say anything that seems off. But Ashe carry seems fine. Blitzcrank support seems fine. Gangplank carry getting nerfed. This is good, but honestly could go even further.
For sure.
Lulu carry getting nerfed. Good, considering how good Lulu is. Lux carry getting nerfed. Good. Nasus buff carry getting buffed. Good, but could have used more. Poppy carry getting nerfed. Good. Renekton carry getting nerfed. Good. Silas carry getting nerfed. Good. Camille support getting nerfed. I mean, considering how good admin is, it was probably correct, but tricky. Okay, here's a spicy one. Malphite.
He's bonkers now.
Yeah, this one probably didn't need to happen. I think this was actually a miss. I think the combination of the Malphite buffs and this was too much. He is a very good. This is a very good augment now. Very good.
I just insta-pick it or even force it when I get a mascot opener.
Yep.
Yeah, he's been like 3 top 1s for me for so far.
Yeah, I think it's finally catching on, like as of like 2 days ago. But yeah, it's really good now. I think this was a mistake.
By the way, related to one-cost augments, now I think we're actually at the point that you're not forced to reroll. Was it kind of like your original idea to have like a balance between support augments that actually allow you to get to level 7 and level 8, right?
Yes.
And one cost also to reroll. But I think we haven't had that until like exactly this patch.
Yep.
Because whenever it was one cost, it was just like straight up full reroll.
Yep.
So,
that was the goal, right? Like, I think it was Socks in his twit longer was talking about how he took the Poppy shield augment and then used it to fast 8. I'm like, yes, that's the vision, right? We wanted you to have that opportunity. And so we're finally maybe getting there, but yeah, it turns out getting there was pretty tricky. So
yeah.
Yasuo support, good. Yumi support, I actually think this buff was unnecessary. I think because it moves faster also, and it's just better than Yasuo. I think this was a bad buff. LeBlanc, this buff was fine, but not enough. The LeBlanc clone's always going to have this issue where it doesn't benefit from the traits, so it's just worse Woodland Charm. Neela buff, again, I think the augment getting these buffs was fine. I think it should have come with a Neela nerf. Neela needed a nerf, sure. And that was the big miss this patch, was not getting a Neela 3 nerf in. The jump from Neela 2 to Neela 3 is bananas.
Makes no sense.
Yeah. So
plus, it's exactly 5 units for the reroll comp, right? Everybody gets a CC, anti-CC, so that's just too much.
Yeah, it's like I said, the big thing is just, again, the jump from 300 heal to 400 heal is just so big. Okay, Riven, this was fine. Sona, this was good. I think the Sona augment is now actually pretty good, so that was cool to see. Spread Shot is now healthier. Pretty happy with Spread Shot. Vel'Koz,
especially because it's not bugged anymore with Shojin, right? Like,
no, it's still nothing changed with Shojin. So,
it's still bugged then.
Yeah. I mean, it's still. I don't know if I'd call it a bug. You could debate it because it actually works just fine. Like Shojin works the same way with and without Spread Shot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just in order for it to be worth it for her to cast that much, you need Spread Shot, right? Like if you run a non-Spread Shot Vayne with Shojin, you're losing out on a lot of physical damage for just the base spell. So it only becomes worth it with Spread Shot. So that's the big thing there.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. And regarding this Vel'Koz nerf that we're going to talk about now, what happened to Vel'Koz and why did you just destroy this unit at some point in the set? Because I remember this guy, it was a very cool unit. I think it's because when you had 2 Vel'Koz together, they would one-shot the carry, right?
Yeah.
But he just disappeared at one point and nobody buys him anymore.
Yeah, so you can blame me for this one. My belief is that Vel'Koz as a unit is just anti-fun. The fact that he always targets your carry, he reaches this critical mass point where, you're running 2 of them and your carry doesn't get to play, or you're running a 3-star and your carry just instantly gets deleted. I don't think that's a healthy targeting pattern for our game. It's like you can build the best front line in the world, doesn't matter, carry's instantly dead. And so I chose to kind of delete him from the game, if you will, by making him a little underpowered. His utility is still good, but I really didn't want the, death cap Vel'Koz's just deleting carries. It's just really unfun. So I don't know. I think there's some long-term lessons to learn from that design. Clearly the people who are playing him are having fun, right? It's like the ultimate assassin, but I don't think that's a healthy paradigm for the game.
Did you like consider like redesigning this champ throughout the set? Like maybe only focus on CC or only on damage, so you wouldn't do both. Maybe he can burst you, but while you're surviving, you can still hit or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of what we were trying to do with the augment. It was like if you took the carry augment, he can still slowly delete your carry. The 400% extra damage is a lot for a carry augment. I just, again, any comp, because the other thing is he's traitless, right? And so the ability to just play a traitless unit and delete everyone's carry doesn't require any setup whatsoever. But yeah, unfortunately we never got around to like changing that, and so, you know, spoilers, Vel'Koz won't be in the mid set. Shocker. But, you know, yeah, he'll go down as a lesson for the sets design team, I think.
Cool.
Zoe buffs, I actually think these were fine. Zoe, like, they don't change the fact that Zoe's strong in the comp she was strong in. The augments were actually bad before. I think these Zoe buffs were fine. Aurelion Soul, fine, same thing. It's a good augment, but, you know, Aurelion Soul's still not one of the stronger ones. The Echo Carry augment, I still think this augment is rough and not great, but at least it's like, there are cases where it's kind of playable now, but they're pretty rare. So
I mean, specifically on these 4-cost utility units, it's really weird to take the carry choice, right? Because it's so uncommon to actually get them to carry any game, even if you pick the augment.
Yep. Misfortune nerf, this was good. I think the Misfortune Make It Rain is finally exactly where it should be. Sejuani, this buff was fine, but again, you still probably never take this augment compared to the other 4-cost augments. The Zed buffs, I think, was good. Again, Zed actually, like, the Zed carry augment is now actually something you can take. That feels good. It's not just better than the carry or the support augment. So, Aphelios, this nerf was fine. Janna, okay, Janna, this augment, like, obviously it needed this much of a buff, and it still isn't good.
It's still not good. Because I rarely get to choose the 5 was.
Yeah, no, this augment is, I think, like, the worst augment in the game right now still. So yeah, next patch I'm taking a stab at trying to make Janna work, because I do want Janna, like, if you have 6 Spellslinger Janna with this augment and some items, you should be able to win a game, right? And like, so we're gonna take a stab at that next patch, but right now it's just it hasn't been there. So Janna is not worth putting items on, basically, other than Chalice and Zeke's, you know.
Yeah,
so,
whatever you have left, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Nunu, these changes were fine. And then Syndra, this is just an augment that needs a rework. This augment it now gives them 100 AD, AP, armor, and MR, and it is still a terrible augment. So
yeah, it still sucks way more than the other one.
Yep.
I was wondering, by the way, have you guys been thinking about doing something about Nunu? Because even though his augments are better this patch, or overall, plus the gadget team buffs, he just feels underwhelming as a 5-cost. I don't know how stats talk about that, but
yeah,
every time I have a 2-star Nunu, he just kind of sucks a lot.
Yeah, I think Nunu's interesting in that he can do some pretty insane things, but it requires a lot of setup. So, I don't know. It's one of those things we'll keep an eye on. Obviously, with the Gadgeteen nerf coming up next patch, he might need a little bit more love. But man, like, when you get a Nunu and it does work, like, it does a lot of damage. But yeah, if he falls over or his pathing goes wrong, he's one of those champions that's like, he's just inconsistent is the word I would use. And that inconsistency makes him hard to invest in. So, something we can look at.
Okay.
All right. Again, augments. There's a lot here, so I'm going to try to browse through. Ancient Archives, I think finally feels good. 4 gold plus a tome is actually really tempting. Can sometimes be better than just hitting the emblem itself, so I like this a lot now. Anima Squad Crown, this was not enough of a nerf. You're going to see next
not
patch.
Enough?
No, this
Really?
augment, especially at lower elos, but again, even at high elos, this augment is still insane. I think there's like 5 or 6 crowns right now that are dominating the stats. So we're going to take a bigger swing next patch on some of these crowns. But yeah, it turns out getting +1 trait and the 3 cost and a full item is like a big power swing early. So
Interesting.
Yep. Big Friend, this is fine. This augment's still good. If anything, this was one of the few nerfs that actually hit the Neela comp. So this was a good nerf for that, but it's still a good augment, so good there.
Regarding build diff in these kind of augments, I was wondering, why have you guys been like adjusting them back and forth all the time? Is it because it's confusing that the units in the set kind of always need their synergies to work, or why exactly is it like a patch depending kind of thing? Because like Samiro without Ace does like half the damage, or you can just kind of notice it, right?
Yeah, the nice thing about built diff numbers is that generally to most players, they're invisible, right? They just kind of assume, hey, if I play no traits, my champs get better. So these kind of buffs are generally good, but we don't want it to be the kind of thing where, like, if you pick built diff, you just win the game. So, like, there was a while, I think it was 13-1, where the stats on built diff were nutty, right? And it was like 55%, 56% top 4. So we're trying to bring that down. We overshot it a bit. They're just a little weak, so we tried to buff it up. This was specifically built diff 3. Built diff 3 is one of the harder ones because you have to compete with all the other prismatics. This buff in particular actually wasn't even enough. Built diff 3 is still not worth it. But we're also trying to make it a healthy curve, right? Because like old built diff, it was like a win streak augment, right? You would take it and win streak till stage 4 and then get out of it, or like really hope that carried you to I think a third, but you couldn't win with it. Whereas we really want built diff to be something that's like changes your play style and like, yeah, I can win with this really cool play style in a healthy way. And so that's why we had switched it to like the scaling. It basically replaces your trait with essentially an invisible trait.
Plus, it's a little bit more interesting due to threats existing, right? Because you kind of need threats in your comp, but they're not useful.
Yep, exactly. So, Cybernetic Shell 3, this buff was fine, but didn't do enough. That augment still sucks. It's always really telling, by the way, when an augment that gives your team 50 armor is bad in an AD meta. That is not a good sign. Cybernetic Uplink 3, this one actually did seem to move the needle. Also, the fact that AP comps got better, turns out. So that was good. Electrocharge 3, same thing. We didn't buff it enough. This was too light of a buff. Okay, here's the hot one. Gadgeting. So, I am happy with this change in the sense that people get to play Gadgeting, and it's fun. But, obviously the miss here was 12% being this accessible was too much. And what this did was it really allowed people to explore the really broken versions, right? The Gadgeting set, the Gadgeting Wukongs. I don't know if you've got any other secret ones, but yeah.
Gadgeting,
go ahead.
Velvet said whatever, I don't. Viego I tried the other day with, Titans and Bloodthirster, just never died.
Yeah. I could imagine a Gadgeting Zedge version, So there's a lot of versions out there, and they're too good. This should have come with a nerf for Gadgeting from 12% to 10%. It's coming next patch, but that was the big miss. I'm still glad this augment exists the way it is, and it'll be fun that people are going to be able to play with a balanced version of Gadgeting, but it was a miss to not nerf it here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Cool. High-end shopping. This nerf seemed to work. High-end shopping is now a balanced, if not even maybe bad augment. So I know a lot of high-level players were complaining that this was an auto-win. It's not an auto-win anymore. So
really, the 7 gold made the difference. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah. Stats-wise, it's actually not looking that great. So
okay,
we'll take it. Knife's Edge. This change was fine. Laser Core. This change probably shouldn't have happened. As you mentioned, Laser Core's in a weird spot right now. I don't think this helped things. So, and then the threat level maximum. This change was fine. Threat level maximum seems to be pretty good now.
It's because all the other things went down as well, I guess, right? Simultaneously.
Yep. Cool. And then small changes. Camille's fine. Camille's still doing good. The Silas bug fix and not letting you abuse. Like, there was some hidden comps where you could play 2 Silases with this carry augment and instant cast and do some bonker stuff with Misfortune. Those are gone. Senna, that's fine. So, and then bug fixes. So, yeah, that's generally it. Like I said, I think the big misses were the Gadgeting. That was probably the biggest miss. There was one other one we talked about. Oh, admin. Gadgeting and admin.
For sure.
Cool. So that's it. But overall, I still think the meta is one of the best, if not the best, of Monsters Attack so far. So I'll take it as a win. But what do you think?
I mean, ever since last patch, even was it an 80 heavy patch, I had the feeling like it was around when we played GSC that I had the feeling we pretty much like flexed into any comp. Obviously, some were better than others, but that's always going to happen.
Yep.
But it felt much better overall. I think you're getting it done these last sets, so I'm happy about that, even though some patches are a bit more rough.
Yeah. I mean, this tends to be our pattern, right? Is you launch the set, you have some rough patches, the last month usually looks pretty good, and then we do it all again. And so mid-set come in, in a patch, and so, yeah.
I I mean, it kind of gets me wondering, maybe sometimes it's actually better for you guys to design easier champs, like not the hacker kind of mechanic.
Yeah.
Because if it takes like 2-3 months to actually get it going, right? Maybe it's not even worth it. Or
Yeah, like I said, I think long term we've got some changes to hopefully address this. So hopefully you'll be hearing about those soon. But yeah, I agree. It's still something we definitely need to tackle long term. So
sure.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on here. Is there anything else you'd like to say as we close out?
No, it's just a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, and keep on watching TFT and enjoying this awesome game.
Sweet. Thank you so much. All right, that's gonna do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.